Brad Treliving is the 18th general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it's good that the Leafs have a general manager on account of it's June tomorrow. I'm Steve Dangle, this is my YouTube channel, so let's talk a little bit about Brad Treliving, who is the newest general manager of the Leafs. Real quick, think you know which way it's gonna go? Make your next bet at Sports Interaction, where Brad Treliving was the odds-on favorite to be named the newest Leafs GM, and here he is. When the puck drops for the Stanley Cup Final, and it won't feature the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm very sad about that, Sports Interaction has you covered. For all major sports, the best pregame, live-in play, and prop bets. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN and download the Sports Interaction app, but only if you're 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Now, here's the thing about Brad Treliving being hired as the newest Leafs GM. Am I excited about it? Am I thrilled? Am I over the moon? Am I jacked to see this thing start? No, it's fine. Like he's fine. He's a fine candidate. He might do a really good job. He might do a really bad job. It's just... Listen, I think there's a real sour taste in the mouth of this fan base right now for a variety of reasons. Number one, the early playoff exit again, even though it was less early than in previous seasons. It was awkward over the span of a week. Dubas on a Monday gave his organization the impression that he might not want to be the GM of the Leafs. And on the Friday, Brendan Shanahan not only told him that his services were no longer needed with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he told us almost everything. By almost everything, I mean Brendan Shanahan left out some of the most important parts, like Kyle Dubas wanting to streamline things within MLSE, potentially cutting Brendan Shanahan out of the picture, and Shanahan getting rid of Dubas could at least be in part because Shanahan wants to protect his own job. You can call it Succession, you can call it Game of Thrones, you can call it whatever, but it's business. But it's not going to make anyone feel any better that a guy who the Leafs thought was the right guy for the job and were prepared to offer him a contract extension, and in fact they did, less than a week later rescind that and get rid of him. So I think we're all disappointed about the way things ended against the Florida Panthers, and then that weirdness happened. And then the team replaces him with Brad Treliving, who is a guy. As a general manager, I don't think his reputation is particularly good. I don't think it's particularly bad. He's made some moves. Some of those moves worked. Some of those moves didn't. I guess the question that I'm asking myself as much as I'm asking you is, what did any of us expect? Now, before you say, I expected Kyle Dubas to return, that ship has sailed. It's done. He's gone. He's going somewhere else. Pittsburgh, Ottawa, we don't know, but it ain't gonna be here. So let's let that thing go. So again, knowing Dubas is gone, what did we expect? Who were these far superior candidates who were out there and available and wanted this job? Eric Tulsky's name was thrown out there. Doesn't really sound like he was considered majorly. Mark Bergevin, we know, had a Zoom interview with the Leafs, which is fascinating, and also it was an interview over Zoom. Treliving, as far as we know, is the only dude who got a face-to-face interview. Several insiders, I want to say Elliot Friedman, implied that a couple other candidates might have been interviewed, but at the end of the day, it seemed like Treliving was the Leafs guy from the start. Could they have gotten some new blood in there? They could have. They certainly could have. An AGM who's been around the block and done a lot of great things, and they're ready for a promotion. And maybe they could have done that, but let me ask this. Didn't they just do that? They hired Dubas to be the assistant general manager of the Leafs when he was still in his 20s. They waited a few years. He got tutelage under Lou Lamoriello, and then he was his own GM for half a decade. And he did a lot of good things here. Didn't accomplish very much, but some of the best regular seasons in the team's history, and they did, ironically, win their first series in 19 years, which ultimately got him canned. But now they go with a much older guy who has been a general manager in the National Hockey League for a long time, Brad Treliving, who turns 54 this August. I know that from EliteProspects.com. Do you want to know what else I found out about Brad Treliving from that website? Brad Treliving played for the Brandon Wheat Kings and the Regina Pats of the WHL, and I can only assume every single draft pick the Leafs get for the next half-decade is going to come from one of those two teams. He also played in the ECHL for a team called the Columbus Chill, which I assume is what he tells Jarmo Kekalainen when he calls him upset. A little bit of IHL, a couple brief cups of coffee in the AHL, Most of Brad Treliving's hockey career has been in management, which is surprising because Elite Prospects lists Brad Treliving, and I'm serious, at 6'4", 225 pounds. To give you an idea of how big that is, I'm pretty sure that's roughly the size of Edge, the wrestler. And that is why he is automatically better than Kyle Dubas, who is like roughly 6'1". He's still pretty tall, but he's not 6'4". You can't teach that. Intangibles, let's go! But seriously, no one should care about that. No one should care about the fact that his dad is Jim Treliving, the dude from Shark Tank and the owner of Boston Pizza. Because none of those things help him be a better general manager. Ironically, even though the timelines were a little different, Brad Treliving's tenure in Calgary ended a little bit like Kyle Dubas' tenure in Toronto. Last season, the Calgary Flames achieved tremendous regular season success that they carried into the playoffs, and they won a round before facing a divisional rival in the second round and promptly losing in 5. And from there was a departure, granted one that took a year, where there were a lot of rumors about Brad Treliving not being allowed to do his job properly and being undercut by other members of the Flames organization and not wanting Daryl Sutter to continue being the coach, which is usually the GM's responsibility to hire and fire that guy, but didn't sound like it was Brad's. Can someone please tell me that ownership also wanted Bill Peters and Brad Treliving didn't? Because that would make me feel better also. But it's interesting to me that over the last couple weeks, Brendan Shanahan and the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Board's supposed meddling with the Leafs, it's been such a hot button topic, and yet that's something that's followed Treliving around through his time in Calgary. Is that a special situation? Probably not. I think a lot of people who spend millions and millions, if not billions of dollars on their hockey team want something to say with it. I think when they start making hockey decisions, it becomes an enormous problem because what the hell do you know? I could sit here on my YouTube channel and yell and scream that the Leafs should trade one of the core 4, but thank goodness nobody employs me to actually make that decision. Generally speaking, they leave those decisions up to people with expertise and experience. So here's what we got. Right? Forget Brad Treliving for a sec. What do the Leafs have in front of them in the immediate future? Besides a number of free agents, restricted free agents, they always have those things. Number 1, Austin Matthews, apart from having a no-move clause kick in on July 1st, he's due for a contract extension. If that contract extension is not signed sometime in July, you have to seriously consider trading him. It doesn't sound like it's going to head that way. It sounds like the Leafs are going to be able to get this job done. It's been reported that Treliving has a good working relationship with Judd Moldaver, who is Matthews' agent, and that's good. But he might have to make that decision. Now, take everything I just said about Austin Matthews and apply that to William Nylander because he needs a contract extension as well. Does he get moved? The draft is coming up in just under a month, and according to earlier reports, I don't know if this has changed, Treliving will not be allowed to participate in what the Leafs do at the draft table. He has information from his time with the Flames and obviously worked on that all year, and the Flames, who were paying Brad Treliving until recently, obviously don't want him bringing that information over to the Leafs. Ultimately, the GM probably doesn't have that much power in that situation anyway. That's why you hire a scouting staff. But potentially, after this year's draft, he could make big changes to that scouting staff. But until then, the Leafs scouting staff right now is going to be their scouting staff in a month for the draft. And of course, outside of Matthews and Nylander, doesn't look like John Tavares is going to go anywhere. He controls that with his full no-move clause. But there is the idea of potentially moving Mitch Marner. One of the changes Dubas made to his own thinking at that final press conference that sure enough ended up getting him fired was the willingness to move on from one of the core 4. Now, a report from Chris Johnston of the CJ Show on SDPN indicates that all the core guys on the Toronto Maple Leafs were reached out to by Brendan Shanahan, and they all came away from that conversation with the idea, with the feeling that they were all returning to the Leafs. But ultimately, that decision will now fall at Brad Treliving's feet, and if he wants to make a big move, he can. What we know from his time in Calgary is he's willing to make that big move. Now, I know the one you're thinking of. We'll get to that in a sec, but Remember the Dougie Hamilton trade? That's a trade that we talked about on today's Steve Dangle podcast that I think the Flames actually did pretty well in. The Flames traded Michael Furland, who was never quite his Calgary Flames self and battled a lot of injuries. Carolina got Dougie Hamilton out of that deal, and the rights to Adam Fox, which I know, went to Carolina. Here's the tricky thing with Adam Fox. He was drafted by the Calgary Flames, so you can look at that and go, oh, someone in the scouting department did their homework. The issue is Fox went to university, and he did not want to sign with the Flames. And then he got traded to the Hurricanes. And he didn't want to sign with them either. So even though the Hurricanes got Adam Fox out of this deal, they ended up flipping him to the Rangers, who he was going to go to the entire time, and they got 2 second-round picks for him. This dude is nominated for the Norris. He's probably going to win the thing. 2 second-round picks? Like, Devon Taves went for 2 second-round picks, and that return sucked for him. This is Adam Fox, man. In return, the Calgary Flames got Elias Lindholm, who was the runner-up for the Selke Trophy last year, 40-goal scorer last year, and also Noah Hannafin, who has been a steady defender for them for a long time. At the time, did I love that deal for the Flames? No, but time has shown that it's actually gone pretty decently. Then there's what happened last summer, and somewhat of a similar situation. It was the Florida Panthers and the Calgary Flames coming together on a not so great situation for either camp. The Florida Panthers, they just won the President's Trophy. They were unbelievable and got swept in the second round by the Lightning, who ended up going to the Stanley Cup final. Then there were the Calgary Flames, who had a kind of similar disappointment. Really good regular season, flopped in the second round. The Panthers had record-breaking Jonathan Huberdeau, who needed a new deal, and Mackenzie Weegar, really good defenseman, needed a new deal. And the Calgary Flames had Matthew Tkachuk, who needed a new deal and did not want to return, supposedly. There's conflicting reports on that. What happened? Well, we know what happened. Huberdeau took a huge step backwards and went down 60 points from his previous season's total. And if that happens, it barely matters what Mackenzie Weegar does. Matthew Tkachuk, meanwhile, is nominated for the Hart Trophy. So I don't know if I'm willing to put my stamp on him being good or bad at his job. He's definitely willing to make a big move. He is willing to take a risk that could work out great for his team and organization, or potentially be a failure, yeah. But if you're not willing to take a risk, if you're not willing to potentially fail, your options are to just sit on your hands and run it back. Over and over and over again with a team that has simply not rewarded you. Like, Leaf fans watching this right now, can I ask you, what is your appetite for running back this core? The core 4 forwards, and we can throw in Morgan Rielly there as well. He's been here the whole time, and he makes more than William Nylander. Is there an is there an appetite at all to run this back? Did they make progress? Yeah. 5 wins out of 16 in the playoff. Like, you're willing to run that back? I'll be honest. I'm not. If the Leafs don't make some sort of change, I'm going to be tremendously disappointed. And what's hilarious is, what are the odds that the Leafs win a Nylander or Marner trade on paper? Pretty low. Will he make that big move for the Leafs? We'll have to wait and see. Now, where does that leave other members of the Leafs organization? Like, we'll start with the front office, Brandon Pridham, Haley Wickenheiser, the 2 assistant general managers. We haven't heard anything about them leaving. There were rumors with Pridham, but those seem to have cooled down significantly. Sheldon Keefe as the head coach, we'll see. I am starting to not think that he's going to get fired. Who would replace him? There's lots of head coaches available. Going off the board a little bit and just putting on my tinfoil hat, supposedly Treliving did not get along with Daryl Sutter and did not want him to coach the Calgary Flames anymore this season. Well, who was he going to hire? Who was available? One guy who was on the Flames bench last season was Kirk Muller, a guy who's been sniffing around for a job for a while. Fascinating to see how that pans out, because the Leafs are already down an assistant coach in Spencer Carberry, who is now going to be the head coach of the Washington Capitals. Here's what I would say. If you're super jacked about Brad Treliving getting hired to the Toronto Maple Leafs, cool your jets, maybe, because the Brad Treliving that you saw in Calgary is not necessarily going to be the Brad that you see in Toronto. It's just a different situation. Different president, different resources, different people, different everything. And if you don't like the Brad Treliving hiring, give him a chance. Like, give him a... Here's the thing. If you think he's going to fail, fine. He's here now. He's the GM. At least give him the chance to fail. If you cheer for the Toronto Maple Leafs and want them to succeed, you should not be cheering against the success of Brad Treliving. I'm just saying. And now, tomorrow, we await the Brendan Shanahan and Brad Treliving press conference. I'm sure it's going to be awkward with some weird questions. For now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe. If you really liked it, tell all your friends. Hopefully he's not bad Treliving. And because then he'll be Brad Treliving. For now, he's Brad Treliving. I'm gonna turn it off.